Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Pete Dougherty. I am Olivia Reiner. The schedule is out for the Green Bay Packers in 2021, and it is a doozy, including 5 primetime games. We'll break the schedule down, plus we'll give you the latest quarterback update that has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers in just a moment. Before we get into that, as always, you know the drill. You can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Pete and I love hearing from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. The Packers' schedule is so tough that I am just exhausted thinking about it. Thankfully, I don't have to play. Let's take a quick look at it. If you look at the schedule here, you'll notice something. 6 of the first 9 games are on the road for the Packers. That includes 2 West Coast trips. I'm not talking Midwest road trips. I'm talking West Coast road trips. San Francisco in week 3, Arizona in week 8. And you'll notice it's a pretty late bye week, week 13. What is the key, Pete, for Matt LaFleur to keep his players fresh during this stretch?
Yeah, it'll just be, doing what he's done the last 2 years and maybe more of it, and getting to it earlier, where Wednesdays, that's the first practice day of the week. A lot of those practices will be maybe half, 2/3, maybe even more will be walk-through stuff, jog-through, and only some of it will be full speed. If there are a lot of injuries, maybe none of it, and then have Thursday and Friday as the only real practices where you're going full speed. I know that's something that he generally gets to, halfway through the year he starts doing more of that, but I think the health of the team has a lot to do with that, the longer schedule. I wouldn't be surprised if he's more inclined to start it earlier, and, all those road games too. So it'll just be more of what he's already been doing with shortening practices and taking loads off the players' legs by doing more jog-through stuff.
Not only is the structure of this schedule challenging, the opponents are also going to be quite difficult as well. 10 of the 17 games that the Packers are playing this season are all against teams that were in the playoffs last season. 2020 is 2020. I understand that. Teams that were really good in 2020 may not be so good in 2021. How should we go about evaluating the Packers' competition this upcoming season, despite the fact that we don't know exactly how talented they're going to be in 2021?
Yeah, I'm not a huge, going off on the schedule and just scrutinizing it to death, because, I know the statement comes from Bud Grant, who coached the Vikings going back into the 60s. And I doubt he made it up. So it probably goes back to the beginning of football and the beginning of the NFL. But it's the old saw. It's not who you play, it's when you play them. Just think of 2 years ago, the Packers go down to Kansas City. No Mahomes, no Chris Jones in that game. It'd be like playing the Packers without Rodgers and Kenny Clark. So that was just a completely different team they played that game. And what looked like a really tough game, maybe even one you'd have to put, you'd have to say more likely loss, turned into a win for them, and a reasonably easy one. So it depends so much on circumstances. They do have that tough stretch. They're playing, I think it's Seattle and the Chiefs, I think, maybe back-to-back, and then the Rams a couple weeks after that. That's some good team. Yeah, Chiefs and then Seahawks. That's a pretty tough stretch of the schedule. But you gotta play these teams sometime. They knew the schedule. They didn't know when they were playing them, but they knew who they were playing as soon as their season was finished, as soon as the regular season finished. So you got to play them sometime during the season.
There are plenty exciting games on the schedule that I'm sure Packers fans, you're circling on your calendars. Thankfully, it's going to be the first season in a season that we're able to see some fans in the stands that aren't. There were some sanctions before, and there will certainly be some sanctions again in terms of the capacity. However, more fans will be available to sit in the stands this upcoming season, which is very exciting. Lots of good games to look at on the schedule this upcoming season. One of the games that I have my eye on is week 1. Look at it right there. September 12th at the New Orleans Saints. One of the biggest questions in this game for both sides is who is going to start at quarterback. On the Saints side, both Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill are going to be duking it out for that starting quarterback role. On the other side with the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, we're not exactly sure where he stands at the moment with the Packers. Will Rodgers start? Will Jordan Love start? Will somebody else start? Which game do you have circled on the calendar right now, Pete?
I just because the Chiefs are so good and Mahomes is so fun to watch and such a great player, that's the game that I'm most interested in seeing. And amongst other, one is just to see that guy play. He's just an incredible player. And two is, to see how the Packers defense is. To win a Super Bowl, you got to beat guys like that. I mean, there's only one of them, one Mahomes, but that might be who you have to beat in the Super Bowl. And to get there, you have to beat guys who are at least close to as good as him. Somewhere in there, you'll have to beat them. So a real good test for the Packers defense. So that's the game that I find most interesting.
Let's discuss the latest quarterback news in the Packers universe. And no, I'm not talking about Aaron Rodgers. I'm talking about Blake Bortles. The Packers are reportedly interested in signing Bortles. They haven't yet officially made a signing official. However, there is a possibility that he is going to sign within the coming days, according to ESPN first reported this yesterday. Bortles has mostly played out his career in Jacksonville. He was the third-round pick in 2014, and I would say that the overwhelming characterization of his career is that it has been underwhelming. In his first 3 seasons in the league, he threw nearly as many touchdowns as he did interceptions. However, Bortles has some experience playing under offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, who held the same position in Jacksonville in 2016 and 2017. What role do the Packers expect Bortles to play on their team this upcoming season?
Yeah, there's, it's open to interpretation, the reasons for signing him in particular or a veteran of his type. I mean, I look at it as it's a hedge against, if Rodgers holds out and isn't ready to be the starter for whatever reason, either he's traded or he's just sitting out for the first game. They want to have, I'm assuming they want to have a veteran option, a guy who's started a lot of NFL games as an option in case they don't feel like Jordan Love is ready to be thrown to the wolves. Because, you don't want to rush a young quarterback in when he's not ready. Not that it would crush all of them, but I think some can be crushed by it. There's I think there's examples throughout the history where teams regretted playing a quarterback as early as they did. I think Alex Smith in San Francisco, they regretted playing him as much as he did early in his career. So I looked at him as Bortles as a hedge for in case Love's not ready to start when the season starts and Rodgers isn't here.
What do you think about the anticipated signing of Blake Bortles? Packers fans, let us know. Also, I'm curious to know, is there a game you're looking forward to? Are you planning on coming to any of these games, whether they're on the road or at home? Let us know in the chat right now. We're going to get to some of your comments. Let's take a look at what you have to say. John over on Facebook says that Kansas City fans are the nicest fans in the world. Great tailgate, nice downtown. Arrowhead's a place to see. I thoroughly enjoyed my trip to Arrowhead Stadium a couple seasons ago. Pete, do you have any favorite Kansas City memories in your time covering the Packers?
Yeah. It was just a long time ago. This is in the 90s. And, the media, where they put the media to park, at least the visiting media, you're way away from the stadium. So you have to walk through all the tailgaters, huge tailgating thing. I'm walking along kind of, just talking to whoever I'm walking with, Rob Mofsky, whoever. I have my head down, and all of a sudden, right in front of me is a $20 bill. And I reached down for it, and a guy had a fishing pole where I wasn't paying attention, where he was casting it in front of people walking by who weren't paying attention. And as soon as I reached for it, he reels it away and got a big laugh at it. I thought it was pretty funny. I'd never seen it before. So as far as just like stadium interaction, that's probably something I remember as much as anything.
I don't know what I was expecting you to say when I asked you that.
Probably
However, that was not what I was expecting. Great story, though. Thanks, John.
No, I was made a fool of, and it was funny.
That's quite all right. We've all been there. Let's go over to Smumster on Periscope. They want to know, are the Packers and Rodgers going to make a statement to differentiate between facts and fiction? surrounding Aaron Rodgers' discontent with the Packers organization. We have heard from the Packers. We've heard from head coach Matt LaFleur. We have heard from general manager Brian Gutekunst, who have both spoken about the fact that they have gone out west to meet with Aaron Rodgers throughout the offseason to try to talk to him and figure out what it would take for him to return to the Packers in 2021. The one person we have heard from current teammates, we've heard from former teammates that have had contact with Aaron Rodgers. We have not heard from Aaron Rodgers himself. When, Pete, will we hear from Rodgers?
I don't know. We may not. He might feel like his best strategy is just to say nothing, unless he either feels like he's really losing the PR battle, then maybe he'll say something. Just as likely he would leak things through surrogates. Or if he wants to put more pressure on the Packers and make it seem that he's more adamant than ever that he won't return, then maybe he would say something publicly. But I would bet against that because that would leave him fewer outs then. As of now, he still has somewhat plausible deniability. I mean, not really, but he's, he can at least say that he didn't say all these things. And, he never called for Gutekunst to be fired or anything like that. He can always plausibly deny that stuff. So maybe we won't hear from him. Maybe we won't hear from him until he shows up or until he's traded to another team.
It's a great question. It's a question that a lot of us have, and it's a question that we're not sure if it's ever going to get answered. We'll find out soon enough. Let's take a question from Brian on Facebook. Brian wants to know, do we think with a 17-game season and extra teams in the playoffs now, that the Packers will ever go through a season with just 2 quarterbacks on the roster? This past season, the Packers carried 3 quarterbacks on the roster in Tim Boyle, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love. However, there have been seasons in the past where the Packers have elected to only carry 2 quarterbacks. Is that a thing of the past? Are we never going back to that?
Oh, I think they still could. They would have to have one on the practice. I don't think Love was ever active, was he?
No.
So on game day, they only had 2 active anyway. So I could see them having only 2 on the regular 53, and then have a guy in the practice squad who, if it came to it and you got somebody hurt, then the next week, he'd be the number 2. So sure, I could see him, especially now that they're allowing more veteran guys. Several spots are reserving for veterans on the practice squad. So yeah, I could see him there being a time where they'd only have 2 on the 53 and one on the practice squad.
Thank you, Brian, for your question. Let's go over to Andy on Facebook. Andy asks, can the Packers get a haul in trading Aaron Rodgers after June 1st? The Packers have been adamant that they are not interested in trading Aaron Rodgers. However, that doesn't mean we can't talk about the possibility if things were to change down the road. If the Packers were to trade Aaron Rodgers, we've discussed in the past the incentive that the Packers would have to trade him after June 1st to save some salary cap space in 2021. It would be fewer ramifications if they were to trade him before June 1st. So if the Packers were to trade him after June 1st, what would be the haul in return that they would be looking for?
Yeah, I suspect Andy might be referring to Albert Breer did a mailbag. He works for SI.com, and he had a mailbag today and was asked, and he said he'd asked a couple of executives in the league he knows, and they didn't give the exact same answer, but it was close enough where I think this is a fairly accurate summation. Basically, these guys thought they could get 3 first-rounders, a second-rounder, and a couple starters, which that would have to give you some pause if you're the Packers. You'd at least have to think about it. I know I asked a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago, I asked 2 executives I know, and they said 2 picks and a starting player, 2 first-round picks. So Albert's sources tell him a lot more than mine did. I wonder if I'm a little suspect they could get that much for a guy who's going to turn 38 this year, but maybe they could. I mean, he is a great player. And with how much longer, with what Tom Brady's showing, maybe a team making a trade, if they talk to Rodgers, would be convinced that he could play till he's, 43 or 44. So it'd be worth it. But, that's a pretty big haul if they could get it. Like I said, I'm a little suspicious that they could actually get that much. I'm not real sure about that. I have my doubts, but I could be wrong, and those two executives could be right on the money, and maybe they could make a haul like that, and maybe that will affect their thinking, although I still would think the Packers will be reluctant to move on from a real chance to win a Super Bowl, be a real contender this year, unless they feel like it's just, they absolutely have to.
My follow-up to that, Pete, would be, are any of those starters that are hypothetically included in this hypothetical trade package, would they be quarterbacks? How does that value break down?
I think it's almost a given it would be, because whoever the starter is for the team doing the deal would probably get rid of that guy, like as the example used with Denver, and it was even used with the guys that I talked to, was you trade Locke probably. It could be Bridgewater or Locke, either one, but you best Locke. So Locke would be part of that deal, and I think Breer sources said the same thing. So yeah, I would assume whoever the starter is for whatever team they would do a deal with would be part of that deal. I think that's a pretty good guess.
It's quite the haul. Thank you, Andy, for your question. We appreciate it. Let's take a question here from Scott. Scott asks, will the Packers front office ever just say, we made a mistake trading up to draft Love? If Brian Gutekunst has any regrets in this situation, what do you think he looks back on and says, gosh, I really wish I did this differently?
So for sure, I would think it would be that he didn't cultivate more of a relationship with Rodgers leading up to then. So we're talking in the 2 years before then, so that he could go to him either before the draft or on draft day and say, hey, we're doing this. Now, this doesn't mean we're pushing you out the door or whatever. And he might have more credibility with Rodgers, and he might be more inclined to believe it and feel like he's not being pushed out the door. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe Rodgers would have been upset no matter what. But, we'll never know that, because Gutekunst didn't establish that kind of relationship with him. So that was, I'm sure that's his biggest regret, and that was a major failing. I mean, that was just a major failing on the organization's part. Deep down, does he think drafting Love was a mistake? I still think they did what they had to do, and they had reasons for doing it. Rodgers getting to his late 30s. He's had several major injuries, 2 broken collarbones, 3 concussions in his career. I still thought he was going to be a good player for several years, but his play the previous couple of years hadn't been as good, so you never know for sure. Quarterbacks are so hard to find. If you got a shot at one who you think can be a winner in this league, I mean, that's, how do you not take the shot if you've got it when you're picking late in the first round? First round picks are, they're really valuable. They're good capital. You don't want to just give them away every year. But in the big picture, 1 year, a late first round pick, you look at all the first round picks who bust. I mean, it's a really high percentage, 50% at least, I would say. So to spend a first rounder to get a shot at a quarterback who you think can win in the league, I mean, it's not that big an insurance price, really. Look at all the bad first round picks the Packers have had, guys who are position players. So, to spend that, I thought it was completely worth it. My guess is that Gutekunst still thinks that. Maybe he's changed his mind and thinks that when you have a great quarterback, you just can't do it because of unintended consequences. But I don't blame him for, I'm sure a lot of people in the league think it was a bad move, but I know a lot of people who think it was the right move too, and I'm on their side on this. Their quarterbacks are so hard to find, and if you don't have one, you're in such a bad spot. So I can't blame them for looking out for the future of the franchise. And if worse comes to worse and Rodgers is going strong, you trade Jordan Love in 2 or 3 years.
This is a hard question to answer right now, Scott. What I would advise is that you come back to a live stream in 2 years or in 3 years, ask us the same question, and I have a feeling we'll be able to give you a much more concrete answer at that point. Thank you so much for your question. Let's take a question here from Michael on Facebook. Michael says, do you think Davante Adams will leave next year if Aaron Rodgers leaves this year? Davante Adams becomes an unrestricted free agent after the 2021 season. He went on a talk show recently and he discussed the Rodgers situation, and he discussed his own impending free agency at the end of the season. And he said, if Rodgers is not here in 2021 and beyond, he may have to do some thinking about his own future, which makes a lot of sense. What do you think Davante Adams will end up doing, whether or not it's to extend a contract with the Packers or sign elsewhere, depending on what Aaron Rodgers' status is after the season?
Yeah, I saw there's a lot of reaction nationally to that, and so pundits reacting, and what a bad spot the Packers are in now. They're going to lose Adams. This is just my opinion, but I just think that's a negotiating tactic as much as anything, and maybe some emotional speaking, in the moment. But I just find it, I don't know what you think, Olivia. I find it really hard to believe if the Packers offer him a $30 million signing bonus. I'm guessing he's going to get that's the kind of bonus he's in line for, somewhere in that vicinity. And they offer it sometime this offseason before the real games start. I mean, how do you walk away from that? That's $30 million guaranteed. You could go out in the first game and blow out your Achilles or your ACL, never be the same player again, and that $30 million is yours. And to risk playing a 17-game season to be a free agent next year, and for that injury risk for either a little more money or because Rodgers isn't around for a little better chance to win the Super Bowl, as opposed to $30 million in the bank for life for you. I just don't know how he would pass that up. That just would strike me as a really huge risk. I mean, you never know, but I suspect if the Packers make him that kind of offer, he's going to have a really, really hard time turning that down. Like, I could be wrong, but that's a lot of money, guaranteed money to walk away from.
In my mind, it is not a matter of if the Packers are going to offer Davante Adams a contract extension. It is a matter of when they're going to do so. Are they going to try to get something done before the start of the 2021 season? Are they going to try to get something done after the season? The sooner they do it, likely the better, and the more money the Packers can probably save than getting through the 2021 season, depending on how Adams finishes and depending on his health. It would be ideal for them to get one done sooner rather than later. So we'll see exactly how that all shakes out. I'm curious, just like you, Michael. And thank you all so much for your insightful questions. We appreciate you participating all the time. We will have lots of coverage up on PackersNews.com this upcoming weekend, because tomorrow is the start of rookie minicamp. So make sure you're checking out all of our stuff over on PackersNews.com. For Pete Dougherty, I am Olivia Reiner. We will see you next time.